So, Jack, thank you for making time, man. I appreciate you making a little bit of time to talk about commercial real estate trends in 2026. I've worked with a lot of commercial real estate lawyers over the years, but I think at this point we are you might be the longest tenured person I've worked with on the commercial real estate front.
I think that's fair. I think
Uh,
we started in '06 about.
I think that's right. We were law school classmates, although different years. And then we were in the same building out
Yep,
there in the Research Triangle Park. I was at Moore Van Allen and you were at Kennedy Covington, which
that's
then
right.
turned into K&L Gates. Same building, different floor.
That's right.
Probably saw each other in the elevator a few times. And then I think we were on the opposite sides of a couple of deals. So we got
That's
to,
right. Yep.
go to battle on purchase and sale agreements and lease agreements a couple of times. And then, man, I've just really enjoyed staying in touch. I know you did some work with us at Forrest firm and stretched your business wings and then, have come back to law. So I'm just really grateful. You're doing a lot of work in the commercial real estate space with me and our clients on a day-to-day basis. So why don't we just start with like some things that you're seeing in the marketplace that you think people might find interesting and maybe take it from the
Sure.
lens of maybe the last 12 to 14 months, or if you even want to go a little bit shorter, like what are you seeing like in 26 that from the bird's eye view that you get representing developers, nonprofits, kind of everything in between from a purchase and sale leasing perspective.
Sure. So I think the obvious one is kind of the still continuing kind of return to office feel that really took a hit during, I guess the COVID years and after that. But in the last 12 to 14 months, and then even more recently, we're seeing a lot more commercial leases, a lot more office leases, but we're seeing them just only in like high quality spaces. So really good locations, really good amenities. It's way more important to now a company or an office to have a really nice space to recruit talent as opposed to an office that exists and they just use whatever leverage they have to get employees. Now they actually want to have an impressive space aesthetically. And again, like I said, location based near shops or restaurants or things like that. But I would tell you the thing that I've actually noticed even more so after kind of pivoting away from that was the reuse component of older, kind of more rundown spaces that are not seeing that bump is dramatic. Whether it's kind of rundown grocery stores that have gone away, CVS,
Yep.
old offices. I'm just
Yep.
seeing a reuse component to that, whether it's a non-traditional business like a brewery. We've seen a lot of breweries go in and kind of using those spaces. Gyms are a really popular one. I've seen gyms kind of popping up in CVS, old CVS or old Walgreens locations. And then even from a church perspective, I mean, I'm seeing larger churches take spaces like a grocery store, an old grocery store that's now gone. It ends up being a great spot for some churches from a parking standpoint and just a space standpoint. So those are some things that I've been seeing really recently.
Yeah, that makes sense from my seat. And I'm not doing real estate all day, every day. I'm doing more corporate stuff. You see real estate becoming a play, it's not necessarily for traditional needs. It's really a talent play, right?
That's right.
Does the talent pool, does the labor force require a place to come and gather? And if so, we've got to do that.
That's right.
And then the reuse thing, I have a follow-up question. I mean, do you think it's more reuse than you saw 5 years ago, less, about the same? Because at
Um,
some level, it could be the economy constricting at some level, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Or just the economy changing and it's not the same use over and
I think the economy changing has created more reuse, and I don't know that it's necessarily new. I think you saw some of these establishments didn't were not going to go out of business until the economy shifted slightly, right? So I think there was a time when a CVS and a Walgreens on every corner made sense. Five grocery stores within a 1 mile radius made sense. I think as the economy shifted, I think you saw some of the lower level businesses in those type of groupings suffered and ended up going out of business, which is creating kind of vacant spaces, but vacant from a really large and visible standpoint, which from a real estate perspective is really valuable. So a valuable frontage piece of real estate is usable from people who want that, like a restaurant, like a bar, like a brewery, like a gym, people that want to see drive-by traffic. And that's kind of wasn't happening maybe 5 years ago. You weren't seeing them go out of business quite as quickly.
so if you had a room full of clients, right, and you're like,
Yeah.
"Hey, don't do this, don't do that." What are maybe like, I don't know, top 1 or 2 kind of mistakes you're seeing made? I mean, I
Yeah,
know we have a wide disparity of levels of sophistication amongst clients, right?
yeah.
But either in the purchasing and sale contact or the leasing or anything in your purview, what's like, hey, yeah, I see this a lot, and if I could
Yeah.
get the message out to everybody, I would, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's being scared to get lawyers involved too early. Or I guess even tangentially to that is getting a lawyer involved in and saying, just sit back for a second. I've got a lot of this work done and I'm gonna get it done before I bring you in on real tangible stuff. So I guess I just refer to all that as timing in some way. If it from a purchase and sale standpoint, you get into a contract and maybe they decide they're gonna take the bulk of the due diligence, right? They've maybe got the attorney doing title and maybe they decide we'll do survey, we'll take care of financing. It's helpful even if
Yeah.
I'm not taking a front seat in that drive. I'm not driving the bus on that. It's helpful to be copied and be involved in those discussions to know where the pitfalls might start coming up, which is going to lead to issues when you get closer and closer to the end of that earnest money period. And the same thing holds true for leases, honestly, is I get over and over and over again, I get a client who's come and says, "Hey, I've negotiated this lease down to here. Can you just finalize it?" And then we're popping up with issues that the landlord thought or the tenant thought have already been agreed upon. And we're having to kind of re-raise this issue because there wasn't an early enough discussion on some issues that maybe people didn't have the requisite knowledge to know was an issue going in.
Yeah. Let me take the other side of that argument for a second.
Okay.
So lawyers have a reputation that's well earned and that we've historically billed by the hour for as long as I
Sure.
can remember our entire careers, right? 20 plus
Yep.
years at this point.
That's right.
And we're expensive. And therefore, every entrepreneur who wants to make more money than they spend, right? To create EBITDA, they hold us at arm's length sometimes, right?
Yeah, that's
Because
right.
it's expensive, right? So is your thesis that bringing the lawyers in early, which by definition will mean more expense, right? And less profit, is better than waiting to whatever it is, the 4th, 5th, 6th
It
inning of the baseball game, right?
if
Paying a little
Yeah.
less, but then we gotta come back and clean it up.
If everything goes perfectly, then may in a perfect world, maybe they're right. But I will tell you, it does not take me a lot if you just have me sitting back seat, middle on the hump, right? I'm not driving. I'm just along for the ride. I'm copied on the emails. I'm not going to bill a lot on those, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of a double check. But the potential downfalls of which we've seen a lot of will then result in much higher legal fees that wouldn't have happened had we been privy to a couple of those pieces of information even a month or 90 days earlier. So it just will make a big difference in how the ending will play out. And instead of the scramble at the end of closing, which can be an unbelievable amount of hours for the last week, it can come to a closing that's much smoother, easier to manage, and with fewer legal humps to kind of hurdle at the very end to get over the finish line.
Yep. Yeah, and, I mean, not to make this a podcast or webinar about,
Yeah,
AI, but and that's
yeah,
another piece, like, the information has been democratized, what you're really paying for is expertise, and so even
that's
when
right.
coming to us early, my theory would be what used to be 20 hours of work maybe is 10 hours of work now,
That's
right?
that's right.
So, the incentive to come early is actually a little higher, but anyway, any war stories, over the last 12 months, of course, anonymized to preserve client
Sure.
confidentiality, but like, hey, I want to share this with the world is like something to avoid.
Sure. I mean, in using those kind of common mistakes. So a closing where we were really uninvolved in the due diligence aspect of it from a financing standpoint. We're getting right up to, nearing the deadlines for expiration of due diligence. I'm checking in. I've come to now find out that financing was well behind and existing debt on the space that the client was currently in required them to sell that space. So now we were buying a new space. We were going to keep the old space. Instead of that, we had to pivot entirely to a new situation where now we're buying and we're selling at the same time. Can't do one without the other. And we have to kind of totally redo almost the entire setup of the deal, in addition to kind of having to negotiate an extension of due diligence that the seller did not want to give us, which resulted in some dead earnest money. So the risk again, and even from a fee perspective, went high. But then, I guess that's the secondary kind of zinger that you might get is you might get hit with increased earnest money and even potentially non-refundable earnest money that occasionally, depending on leverage, may or may not apply to the purchase price, depending on how bad you need the building.
So let's talk drafting for a second and whether our audience is lawyers or clients. And again, your choice, purchase and sale or leasing agreement context.
Sure.
Are you seeing any drafting trends? For example, this provision you see in the document, it used to be 75% of the time, now it's 25% of the time, or things like that you see from a drafting perspective in the recent past?
I'm seeing a lot of negotiation related to contingencies. And I guess that's from purchase of sale standpoint. So you're seeing a lot of people wanting to hedge risk, right? So now I don't think this was as prevalent even just a couple of years ago. But now we're seeing a lot of like, we're only going to close if this happens, if this happens, if this happens, right? And those were not really negotiated terms for a long time, maybe on the bigger deals, but now they're happening on smaller deals, deals that I would not expect to see that type of language. I think if I were to guess the reasoning, I think financing is tighter. I think margins are tighter. I think clients, whether they're, buying a property or leasing a property, are just a little bit more hesitant and want to check every box. And they almost want to get to where they get a sweetheart deal before they're even willing to do it. I'm seeing timing shift a little bit. I'm seeing instead of tying timing to execution of the contract, it's now often set to approval deadlines throughout, which creates a lot of ambiguity in, from my perspective, in checklists and time, right, deadlines, right? So if I love when it's 120 days from this date, I don't love when it's 120 days from the approval of this thing that has to happen, right? So
Right.
now it kind of takes it out of my hands, and we have to figure out what all these third party approvals are going to need to have happen. Oftentimes that's happening in ground lease scenarios where the ultimate ground tenant is making some decisions. So there's some approvals needed from that ground tenant. So that's happening a lot. And in fact happening right now. And then I guess from a leasing perspective, I mean, they're not, I guess that it's probably not new, but just the abatement of rent in the context of a lease from a tenant's perspective is always a battle. It's always the landlord does never wants to abate rent. The tenant wants some ability to not pay rent if certain services are not provided, if certain repairs are not done properly. And landlords and tenants are forever at a battle of wits about that concept. I think we are still seeing a lot of right of first refusals and options on different spaces. Those are very, very heavily negotiated. And I think they've become more heavily negotiated in recent years because landlords don't want to give them. They want the ability to lease space to anybody who pops up without having to come get a permission. They don't want to give you the option. They just want to eliminate roadblocks from a leasing perspective. So we're seeing that trend.
Yeah, that makes sense. On the purchase and sale front, the timing ambiguity as well as the
Yeah.
contingencies, the theme of that to me seems to be more buyer leverage. I mean, more buyer
Exactly.
leverage means we
Yep.
can more contingencies, harder to get to the hard money and harder to get to the if there's
Yeah,
ambiguity on the timeline, gives more time for us to get a free look basically and have it under
that's
contract.
that's exactly right. So you get a buyer leverage point, which is typically a buyer who's maybe overpaying on the property or who is going to be a great fit for a development, or we're working with developers, nonprofits, whoever it is. If we're in a development and you have a great fit and that person now has leverage, they're going to say, yeah, we want this space, but here's all the things we need. And then from a contingencies perspective, hey, at the end, we all have to agree on this, call it a reciprocal easement document, right? Where we're all agreeing on maintenance and various aspects of stormwater maintenance and roadway maintenance. Well, what happens, what can inevitably happen, is that's usually not attached to that contract. So you can get really far into these deals, 18 months, and now you're getting close to closing. And now you've got this document out there that you have to get approved between the parties before closing. And until that gets approved, we're not closing, right?
Yeah.
So it can create a mess of an end to the transaction when now all the parties are ready to close, but we just can't agree on these relatively minor, although very important documents.
Yeah, and a parallel to the tenant abatement point, do you see it as a parallel where just like it's buyer leverage in the purchase and sale agreement, do you see abatement periods going up as tenant leverage or not?
Has to be tenant leverage. Landlords, because landlords don't want to do it. They would rather give tenant a self-help provision. Hey, we get it. If we don't fix something to your liking
Right.
or in the time period that you want it, we'll give you the right to fix it and come
Right.
get reimbursement. But we don't want to give you free rent. And that can inevitably be a back and forth because yeah, that's where the leverage shifts, right? If landlord kind of has the space they want, they'll give on it. But if it's
Yeah.
really important to a tenant and they're the right fit, that's when you might see it pop up a little bit more.
So not for our sophisticated commercial developers, but more from younger lawyers and maybe folks in the business sector that are new to this. You get a purchase and sale agreement, you get a lease. It's 20, 30, 40 pages long, right? I mean,
Yeah,
even for the most voracious reader, it might put you to sleep, right? What's like the cheat code? What's like the provision or two that you would point to in either context, your choice, that are like super valuable, you gotta pay attention to?
sure. We'll talk about a couple. Like one of them would be warranties. So, whether you're a buyer or seller, whether you're a landlord or a tenant, what is being warranted to you, or what are you warranting? Um, this will often come into play and from a lease perspective is, hey, elevators are in great shape. They're perfect. They've just been maintained. They're brand new. Whatever it is, right? So, um, you can get language in there that says, okay, well then that's great. If the elevators break, it's on you to fix them, landlord. Thanks. If you kind of skirt over those issues, and you maybe have a lease where a tenant's taking a lot of the maintenance responsibility, oftentimes that'll get tucked into your operating costs, or worse yet, it's just your responsibility to fix. Either way, that's a really bad deal. And this comes into play with mechanical systems, which elevators, plumbing is a really big one in HVAC, right? So roo- typically landlords are not going to fight you on roofing, walls, things like that. But those three issues pop up over and over and over again. And if you're selling, it's kind of the same deal. What are you warranting you're giving me? All right. Seller's going to say, no, nothing. I'm not, you're buying what you see, right? And a buyer's going to come in and say, hey, you got to tell me give me a warranty that says, hey, there's no environmental issues on the property. You don't have any knowledge of someone coming in who's threatening to condemn the property. They're threatening to, take a piece of the property by eminent domain, right? So that's a really important piece from all perspectives, lease or purchase, right? And then I think the biggest one, and I don't think it would be a secret, but from a tenant or a landlord perspective, the default section in a lease is super key to go into. What can you do under default? What are carve outs to help the tenant get through if there was an issue? Give me some notice and cure period. What you want to avoid is a landlord having the power to say, oh, you slipped up a little bit, you're in default. And, landlords can say, if they have a better option, they're looking for a way to get you out of the property. They might be able to do that easier if you haven't taken that red pen to the default section and kind of protected the tenant.
Yeah, that makes sense, helpful. So, one of the things I think is a little bit unique about both you and I is we have experience as business owners, right? Me in the legal space, and you
Hmm.
too, by the way, but then
Yeah,
also your foray into the fitness industry, right?
yeah,
I do think, just some personal opinion here. I mean, with AI and the proliferation of AI and information with legal, some of there's a democratization of the info and the intelligence, right? Where a lot of people are calling us, and it's less so about the information, the language, and it's more about the legal experience, been there, done that, the strategy, and sometimes it's business acumen. So, I mean, for those that don't know, tell them a little bit about kind of your business background, and then
yeah,
how do you think that impacts your day to day, practicing law full time?
yeah. I ran so from 2014 to about 2019, I ran four a fitness facility that had four locations. And so we had built that up over time. So we did some acquisitions, acquired spaces, did leasing, did bodybuilding, a couple things like that, right? But um, I think what helps now is having been on the side of the paper, the lease, the purchase agreement, where I was the one purchasing or leasing, now I'm able to kind of, for at least for newer clients, I'm able to tell them a few things that they may not even be looking for because they don't know that it's an issue yet. Being through it several times, you understood like, hey, you need this because here's what can happen, right? If you don't give yourself a grace period for rent and your auto pay fails because your bank didn't make the right move, right? Now you are late on rent. And so you want to build in the a grace period on that, right? So that wouldn't be an issue that any person's going to say, "Oh, I'll just pay rent on time." Yeah, you can absolutely do that and still have an issue pop up, right? So you could have a relocation section in a lease that says, "Hey, landlord has the right to relocate you." You just don't know how disruptive that is to a business. I mean, it's easy to say, "Yeah, we'll pay for you, you know, for new letterhead and all that stuff. We'll pay your moving expenses." The disruption to your actual business over that is much greater than new letterhead and the moving expenses. It often involves having to have a bunch of people not working because they're trying to figure out where they're moving their stuff. So you're going to lose multiple days of actual work time on top of
Yeah.
that. So um, use and make clauses in leases left and right. People tend to not care. They'll tend to say, "Oh yeah, this is my use." But if you don't dive in and get real specific about what your use is, landlords sometimes don't know what that use means, right? Oftentimes in leases, I'll see a use, I don't know what it means, right? So it's just jargon. You need to explain what it means. If you don't, you'll run the risk of the landlord saying, "Oh wait, I didn't know you'd be doing that. That's not okay." And now you're in kind of a battle about what you can do. Very common in the fitness space because of the noise and kind of the in and out nature of what that building looks like. Is you need to be real clear with a landlord about, hey, what's going on, um this is what I'm going to be doing. Is that okay with you?
Yeah. Yeah, the lessons you learn in entrepreneurship don't go away. You tend to not forget, and
No,
this
it happens to you one time, and then I'll deal with it on every lease that pops in now. Yeah.
yeah, it's funny, when I'm talking with clients and I see a fact pattern that I recognize from my entrepreneurship, it's you just you can't not say anything because it's just permanently, like, ingrained in your to your deepest core psyche.
That's right. I won't let him get away with not changing it. I'll tell you that much. Yeah.
Okay, a couple more questions. We've obviously practiced in a lot of different firms, small boutiques, regional firms, mega firms. Tell me about Michael Best for you. Has that been a good fit? What's that been like? Maybe what surprised you, those kind of things.
Yeah, it's been a great fit. So just from my perspective, I've been at all those firms. I've also worked in my own business and I've also been kind of an in-house counsel role. And you could easily say, hey, which one was your favorite? Right. But the thing about Michael Best is it really takes a lot of the best pieces of a lot of those different areas, the best things that I liked, and puts them all in a firm. Right. So what you don't like about a big firm is being pigeonholed into one area of law, sitting at a desk and crunching paperwork 8 hours a day and kind of getting stuck in the closet. Michael Best, from my vision, has always been about real work, client interaction, helping people, innovative ideas, right? When we're tasked with a job and the client has a unique perspective on how they might want to structure their client attorney client arrangement, it usually just involves a discussion and some like there are options other than here's your billable hour and this is what it's going to look like, right? So between that, quality of life, work life balance has been a big deal. I think it offers the best of really interesting work, great clients, and at the same time not just dig yourself into a hole and never come out.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I always appreciated in this last chapter as we practiced together, kind of your focus
Yeah,
on
that's right.
work-life balance and family, and it's really important to me. I think it's part of our age as we get older, right? And we kind of realize
Yeah.
that we're not bulletproof, we're not going to be around forever. You soften up a little bit, and I agree. This place has been a place that you can have a really sophisticated practice, AML 200 practice, North Stars client service. We're going to go after that passionately and non-apologetically, and, you know, a lot of autonomy in how we go about that, right?
Yeah, and that's been terrific. Yeah, the ability to kind of run your practice again, taking the best of another when I had my own firm, right? Being able to kind of run it like, oh, this is how I'd run it if it was my firm, right? and just they're along for the ride. If you have a good idea, they will listen to it and, take you along with them. So
Yeah. Well, to end, man, I'll just say, I mean, I regularly ask for feedback, and then sometimes clients will, when you create that ethos, sometimes they'll just give you feedback. And I feel like we regularly get feedback from our clients about their experience with you. I think sometimes in a positive way. I think sometimes clients come in with a little PTSD from dealing with lawyers in other capacities and are always expecting big bills and lack of responsiveness and things. And pretty regularly getting feedback from clients. And man, Jack was super practical, very efficient, very business minded, really appreciated the experience. So thank you for your work there.
I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you making time.